fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
What non-Christians think about Christians. Woo, this is going to be an interesting one. Hey everybody, Joe Simons, Like Diamonds, back again, Unchurched podcast. Last week, I did a podcast titled, Are You Making This Mistake as a Christian? Got a lot of downloads, got a lot of feedback, some positive, some negative. And I wanted to kind of take this a step further because I believe what I'm about to share today is what all Christians, including myself, need to hear and probably hear again and probably hear again. So this is probably not going to be the last time you hear me talking about this. After reading this book called The Rise of the Nuns, N-O-N-E-S, not nuns as in a Catholic church, but nuns as in this very fast-growing demographic in America of people that are not going to church, are not really calling themselves Christians, and just don't want anything to do with church right now. And I'm going to share the reasons why. And here's why this is so important. I'm now to the point, got some young kids, and my oldest now is 9, and then the 6-year-old daughter as well. And they're now both to the point where they're getting report cards. And if you recall, regardless of your age, at some point all of us had a report card, and maybe you remember some of them that were either painful or maybe even you got a reward for one of them for doing something great. But what I'm noticing now as a parent, looking through my own child's report cards, I don't even look at all the, the kind of the A's and the B's or the I's, like, improved or whatever. It's the NI. In this case, it means needs improvement. That's what the parents are looking for, at least for me. And I'm sure if you're anything like me, you're probably saying my wife does the same thing. It's like, all right, well, yeah, she's good at all this stuff or great at one of this, but man, this one, she really needs improvement. Let's put some focus on that. And that seems to be the stuff that you kind of remember in a good way, right? That's usually what gives you the drive to fix some of the problems that your teachers or maybe even students or peers are saying that you're struggling with. And then recently too, we had a 2-day meeting with myself and Luke and Nate, who's our head integrator, and we're going through this book called Traction. And in Traction, all the other team members must report completely honestly and like full on, like no holds barred, on something that their other team members, so like, if there was 3 of us here, one of us would start and say something really nice or maybe even something that they thought, you had as a superpower, that's something that you were just great at, that you were probably one of the best on the team. And then they would have to say something that you struggle with, maybe somewhere that you fall short. Maybe the opposite of a strength or needs improvement, a big NI on the report card. And we all went around and did it. And it was very powerful because of that second part. The strengths, I think a lot of us kind of already know our strengths. It's kind of more of an ego boost to have someone say something nice about us. But what we really need to hear are the places that we need some improvement. What we really need to hear from our peers, what we really need to hear from even people who aren't maybe on our side are places that we need to improve. And I know after those 2 days, I mean, we talked about a lot, but one thing that was in the back of my head that, I'm constantly now even working on were the 2 areas that my peers said I needed to improve upon. And I thank them for that because it was very powerful and quite honestly, much needed. Sometimes we can get in our own little bubble or ego bubble or whatever it is. I know I'm super guilty of that. And all of a sudden you kind of, maybe brush off or forget about some of your weaknesses, or all of a sudden these weaknesses and maybe even really bad habits become just that. They become habits that you don't even think about, and now it's actually hurting you, your reputation, or whatever it might be. And that's where we are today with Christians. I believe that as Christians in general, not everyone is going to fit this mold, but what I'm about to read to you is going to be pretty revealing. we have kind of formed some bad habits, and some have taken it too far. Some have been super public, and some have been super, just super hyper engaged on social media about some of these issues, which I think just makes it even worse. And so in this book called The Rise of the Nuns by James Emery White, they interviewed these nuns, these non-Christians, and they wanted to find out, why they weren't Christian. A lot of them came from Christian households. A majority of them did, actually, at one point or the other. And they wanted to know why. They wanted to get a report card on what needs improvement. What is it that you don't like about Christians? Where did Christians go wrong if Christians are supposed to be, loving and all the things that we're supposed to be, and be full of truth and grace? And here's what they found. So I'm going to read all of these, and this is what the non-Christians, the nuns, are saying about Christians and why they don't want to be associated with Christianity. So number one is anti-homosexual. 91% of everyone that they have interviewed and surveyed said that one reason they do not want to be associated with Christians is Christians are very anti-homosexual, judgmental. And that was a big piece on last week's episode about how judgmental we've become, including yours truly. I know I'm doing it and working really hard on not being judgmental. And that could be anything from just, hearing someone who says, I don't go to church, or hearing someone who says, I voted for this candidate, or someone that says, hey, I believe in abortion. And all of a sudden you just throw your hands up and just want to slap them. Regardless if it's wrong or right, that's not what we're called to do. What did Jesus do when he would meet someone who maybe wasn't living the best life, right? He didn't do that. He wasn't judgmental, and he wasn't anti-homosexual, and I mean he wasn't all these things that we're slowly or quickly becoming. And this is proof. This is our report card. This is what literally people are saying about us, why they don't want to be associated with Christians in church. So it was judgmental, was up there at the top. Hypocritical, same deal. Old-fashioned, too involved in politics. In this past year you can't argue with that. There was, and I won't even go down that road, too involved in politics, out of touch with reality, insensitive to others, boring, not accepting of other faiths. I've been, guilty of that as well, and confusing. So that's tough, right? I mean, that's our report card, and maybe you could, depending on where you are in life and your journey with Christ and being a Christian, you could say, I don't fit any of those, but I'm willing to bet you probably do. I know I do. I could check off quite a few of those, of maybe things I've said, maybe things I've thought. Maybe it's something you've never, ever said out there. And I'm not talking about just on social media. Maybe it's something you've never even uttered, but in the back of your head, you were kind of thinking it, right? I mean, let me read these again. Anti-homosexual, judgmental, hypocritical, old-fashioned, too involved in politics, out of touch with reality, insensitive to others, boring, not accepting of other faiths, and confusing. And because of these things right here, that's why they're not going to church. That's why they're not pursuing a relationship with definitely not Jesus, but in many cases, even God. Now, what was interesting, a lot of these people did say they believe in God, but it was more of just like, oh yeah, it's the kind of God's the universe, and I just kind of believe there's something there, but I don't really want to know more, and I don't want to be associated with the Christians who say that they have the answers to God and to Jesus. And it was because of this. So if there's one thing that we can work on, maybe pick one of those. I think if all of us did that collectively, wow, I mean, what a difference that would make. And I'm not talking about just on how, Christians are communicating on social media. I'm talking about just how you're loving people day to day. I think there's nothing cooler than meeting someone, when you just get that great feeling about them and they're just so full of just love, like it's exuding from them. And they're just so welcoming to everybody. And they don't have to have, Jesus stickers on themselves, and they don't have to even proclaim that they're Christian. You just know there's something different about them, and that's what we're called to do. And yet now, I mean, especially with this whole election year, to me it was disgusting. Some of the stuff I saw from people who I know call themselves Christians and who were literally flagrantly saying they're Christian, and here's why I'm right, and here's why you're wrong on all these different things, and here's why you're voting for the Antichrist, and just it was like, no wonder we're scaring away, I mean, half of America right now, or more. I mean, so here's the sad part, and this is why this is alarming for our own report card, is most churches in general are not growing. They're shrinking. And the amount of churches are shrinking. And I know you might be at a church that's growing and it's thriving. We go to one here that is. It's a little bit different with COVID right now, but in general, the churches are shrinking. And in general, the nuns, these non-Christians, are skyrocketing. I mean, talking about skyrocketing, in particular with the millennials. And you can say, just like I do sometimes with all the young millennials, they just don't get it, and they've got their head in the sand. But guess what? At some point, they're going to be the ones running this country. At some point, we're going to be long gone, and the millennials are going to be the next presidents. They are going to be the next senators and congressmen and women. They're going to be the ones running everything, and they're going to have a big decision on if churches even matter, or if churches just turn into museums like they've done in many places in Europe. So that's kind of what's at risk here. It's not about us and just our salvation. This is about this next generation. And the only way that we're going to reach them is if we work on this report card. The only way that we're going to have any impact, right? Because that's what we're going to be judged upon ultimately, not just our life, but hey, did we share the good word of Christ? Or did we scare people away from it because we were so judgmental and hypocritical and anti-homosexual? That's not what we were called to do. So this is our report card, guys and gals, and it's hard hitting, and it's what we need to hear. It's what we need to work on. And I'm gonna post this from this book. I'm gonna just list all these things, and I would just say pick one and just try to do the opposite. Just try to maybe someone that you've been judgmental towards, or maybe something you have said online or anywhere, or even just thought. Just try to work on that one thing. I know I'm going to. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but there's one that I've kind of struggled with, and I'm just going to work on it and just try to be more loving. And I think the question to always ask yourself is, what would Jesus do in that situation? How would he handle it? How would he use his special gifts of just love and truth and grace and acceptance? That's really what it comes down to. And I think if we act in that way, none of us are going to be perfect. We're never going to hit a grand slam every time and always be right. But if we can do it more than we're doing today, we're all going to win. And we're going to end up bringing a lot more people into the church and into a relationship with Christ. And that's what ultimately we're called to do. It's not to scare away people, because right now, these people aren't, these nuns, they're not leaving the churches, and they're not being non-Christian because they don't like the way, Jesus is portrayed on a cross. It has nothing to do with that. It's 100% because of current Christians that they know or have dealt with. That's the problem. And so I want to make sure you know that going off this podcast, the report card, it's not something that we can just point over here or over there or up to the sky or say, oh, they didn't like the way this was worded in the Bible. The number one reason that the non-Christians are not Christian today and not going to church is because of current Christians who are existing on this earth, us. Boom, that's it. And that hit me hard reading this book, because I know it's true, and I'm watching it unfold, and I'm part of the problem sometimes. And I'm guessing so are you. So I that's the challenge. I'm going to go put this once again on the blog, saltstrong.com/unchurched. It'll be up. If you're listening to this right when it comes out, it'll be up some point later today. Otherwise, it'll be up there under the same title of this podcast. And I'm going to list this stuff. I'd love for you to pick one and share any thoughts you have on this, any other ideas or maybe cool things that you're doing as a community, as a church. I know there's a lot of people who are fighting this battle hard and doing some really amazing things in the community to change this pretty scary statistic of how fast the unchurched and how fast the non-Christians, these nuns, are growing compared to people who do call themselves Christians. And once again, all fingers are pointing at us as the reason that they don't want to be considered Christian. We've got to change that. So, guys, I love you. I know this was kind of a hard-hitting one, but I know it needs to be said. This book came to me. It's so interesting. I always pray that God just puts the right people and the right messages in my path at the right time. And one of our listeners, Drew, had sent me this book, The Rise of the Nuns, and I couldn't put it down. I read it twice now, and it's just like, wow, this is it. This is kind of, a guidebook, also / kind of an alarming report card on where we are and why we're kind of having issues growing, if you will. So we know what the issues are. It's us. That's the great news, is that it's up to us to fix it, right? This is something that's in our control. It's not some crazy, circumstance like, there's too many hurricanes coming this year that we can't control. This is something that is 100% in our control, and that's the great news. So, guys, appreciate you, love you, and I'd love your feedback on this. So make sure to go to saltstrong.com/unchurched and leave me a comment. I read every single one of them. Peace. I'm out.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul. It was